Commander Rena stood on the bridge of Defense Station Omega, watching her world die. Just 3 days ago, the Kalani had been celebrating the Festival of Harmony, their annual reminder of how far they had come since abandoning warfare centuries ago. Children had danced in the streets while elders shared stories of the old violent times, grateful those dark days were behind them. Now those same streets lay empty. The Vorthok swarm had arrived without warning, their bioships emerging from hyperspace like a plague of locusts. The Kalani had tried to communicate, tried to negotiate, tried to understand what these creatures wanted. The answer came quickly and brutally. They wanted everything. R.I.-Na had been a peace coordinator before this nightmare began, someone who helped settle minor disputes between trading partners. She knew nothing about war, nothing about tactics, or weapons. None of them did. The Kalani had dismantled their military 300 years ago, choosing instead to focus on art, science, and exploration. Their defense stations were meant to handle accidents and natural disasters, not an invasion. The command center shook as another bioship latched onto their hull. Through the view screen, she could see the organic vessels spreading across her home planet like a disease. They didn't just destroy, they consumed, transformed, corrupted everything they touched. Where once green forests had covered the continents, now only writhing biomass remained. Her communications officer, young Kim Jun, looked up with tears in his eyes. "Commander, we've lost contact with all surface stations. The orbital platforms are gone. We're the last one left." Rena nodded slowly. She had accepted their fate hours ago, but she wasn't ready to give up entirely. The Kalani may die today, but maybe their knowledge could help someone else survive what was coming. The tactical data they had gathered showed the Vorthak's path of destruction. Their methods, their weaknesses, if any, existed. "Open a wide-spectrum transmission," she ordered. "Maximum power. Send everything we have." Kim Chen's fingers flew across his console. "Ready, Commander." Rena took a deep breath. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness between stars, other civilizations lived and thrived. Maybe one of them would be strong enough to stop this horror. Maybe someone would care enough about strangers to act. "This is Commander Rena of the Kalani Defense Force," she began, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "If anyone receives this message, please listen carefully. We are the last survivors of our species. A force called the Vorthok Swarm has consumed our worlds and moves on to find new ones. We are sending you everything we know about them, our entire cultural database, and our star charts showing their projected path." The station shuddered again. Hull breaches were opening throughout the structure. She could hear Kim Jun whispering prayers in the old language. "If anyone receives this," she continued, her voice beginning to break, "remember us? Remember what we tried to be. We chose peace. We chose knowledge. We chose hope. Don't let that dream die with us." She ended the transmission and watched as the signal burst into hyperspace, carrying the final words of her people into the unknown. Within minutes, the station's power would fail, and the Vorthok would claim their last prize. But maybe, just maybe, someone out there would hear them. Someone would care. Someone would act. The signal traveled silently through the cosmic dark, racing toward the edge of human space. Jinkai had been working the night shift at Deep Space Monitor Station outposts for 3 years, and nothing interesting ever happened. Most nights, he tracked cargo ships, logged routine communications, and fought off sleep while watching empty space. His biggest excitement usually came from spotting a new comet or catching pirates. Trying to avoid customs. That changed at 0347. Hours on what started as another boring Tuesday. His console lit up with an incoming transmission unlike anything he had ever seen. The signal was powerful, desperate, and definitely not human. Jinkai sat up straight, his coffee forgotten as he watched the data stream in. The transmission was packed with information, star charts, tactical data, cultural files, and something that made his blood run cold. Detailed recordings of a species being systematically destroyed. Computer, run full translation protocol, he whispered. As the alien language converted to readable text, Jinkai felt his stomach drop. The message told the story of the Kalani, a peaceful civilization that had just been wiped out by something called the Vorthok Swarm. But what terrified him most were the star charts showing the swarm's path of destruction. He pulled up human territory maps and overlaid the alien data. The projected route went straight through the outer human colonies. Jinkai's hands shook as he opened an emergency channel to Fleet Command. Within minutes, he was speaking directly to Admiral Hunbo, the commander of the Terran Defense Force. She listened in silence as he transmitted the full alien message. Admiral Hunbo had seen plenty of threats during her 20-year career. Pirates, rogue colonies, territorial disputes with other species. She had handled them all. But as she studied the Kalani data in her command center on Earth, she realized this was different. The recordings showed entire planets being consumed, their populations absorbed into some kind of biological nightmare that grew stronger with each world it devoured. "Surgeon, give me a full tactical analysis," she ordered her aide. "I want to know everything about this Vorthok swarm within the hour." As the reports came in, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. The swarm wasn't just another hostile alien species. It was a force of nature, consuming everything organic in its path and converting it into more of itself. The Kalani had tried every form of resistance, military, diplomatic, even evacuation. Nothing had worked. The worst part was the timeline. According to the alien star charts, the swarm would reach the outer human colony of New Sol in just 4 months. Admiral Hanbo stood before the massive tactical display in Fleet Command, studying the threat assessment reports. Around her, junior officers waited for orders while senior staff calculated response times and fleet positions. Everyone in the room understood what they were looking at: a potential extinction event. "Ma'am," ventured Commander Park J., her chief of staff, "the outer colonies need to be warned. We should begin immediate evacuations." Hanbo shook her head. "Running won't work. The Kalani tried that. This thing will keep coming until it finds Earth." She turned to face her staff, her decision made. "We're not evacuating. We're fighting." She activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing her next words would change everything. "Send word to all fleets," she ordered, her voice carrying across human space. "We have a war to fight." The emergency broadcast from Fleet Command reached every corner of human space within hours. On cargo haulers, drifting between systems, in corporate boardrooms, on developed worlds, in hidden pirate bases tucked away in asteroid fields, everywhere humans lived and worked. The same message played: an alien species was coming to devour everything, and they needed to be stopped. Captain Minsu was 3 days into a routine freight run between the mining colonies when the transmission came through. He had been hauling construction materials and food supplies, nothing exciting. His crew of 12 had been looking forward to shore leave on Titan Station, but as he listened to Admiral Hanbo's briefing about the Vorthok swarm, all thoughts of vacation disappeared. "Captain," his first officer Yunra said quietly, "Fleet Command is requesting all civilian vessels report for military service." Minsu didn't hesitate. "Change course for the nearest military depot. We're not haulers anymore, we're supply ships." His crew nodded grimly. They had families on those outer colonies. If some alien nightmare wanted to eat human worlds, it would have to go through them first. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Corporate executive Lehigh sat in her luxury office on Mars, watching the stock market crash as news of the alien threat spread. Her company, Stellar Dynamics, controlled one of the largest private security fleets in human space. Over 200 ships, designed to protect cargo convoys and mining operations. Her board of directors were panicking, talking about protecting company assets and evacuating key personnel. Lehigh listened for exactly 5 minutes before standing up and cutting them off. "Gentlemen, we're not running," she announced. "Every ship in our fleet is being transferred to military command immediately. This isn't about profit anymore. It's about survival." Even more surprising responses came from the criminal underworld. Park Jin had built his reputation as one of the most feared crime bosses in the Outer Rim. Controlling smuggling routes and illegal trade, his fleet of modified ships had been running contraband for decades, always staying one step ahead of the law. When his lieutenant brought him the news about the Vorthok swarm, Park Jun was quiet for a long moment. Then he started laughing, not from humor, but from pure disbelief. "You're telling me some alien bugs think they can just show up and eat our worlds?" he asked, without even asking permission. Within hours, he had sent a message to Fleet Command offering his entire organization's services. "Nobody eats entire worlds on my watch," he declared. "We may be criminals, but we're human criminals. That's our territory these things are planning to devour." Admiral Hanbo watched the responses flood in from her command center, barely able to believe what she was seeing. Independent colonies were volunteering their entire defense forces. Mercenary companies were offering their services for free. Even civilian transport companies were converting their ships for military use in 30 years of military service. She had never seen anything like it. What had started as a standard military operation was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. The first time an entire species had mobilized together. "Ma'am," her aide surgeon reported, "we're tracking over 8,000 ships from non-military sources requesting assignment to the task force." Hanbo smiled grimly. Maybe the aliens had picked the wrong species to threaten. Commander Yu had volunteered for the advanced scout mission because she wanted to see the threat for herself. The official reports from the Kalani transmission painted a grim picture, but she needed to know exactly what humanity was facing. Her ship, the Defiant, was one of the fastest vessels in the human fleet, perfect for getting in, gathering intelligence, and getting out alive. The 3-week journey to Kalani space felt like the longest of her career. Her crew of 8 specialists worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of data from the alien transmission and preparing their reconnaissance equipment. They knew they might be flying into a death trap, but someone had to see what the Vorthok had done. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kalani system, Yune wished they had arrived sooner. What she saw through the viewscreen would haunt her for the rest of her life. The Kalani homeworld was still there, but it wasn't the same planet anymore, where the alien transmissions had shown green countenance and blue oceans. Now she saw something that looked like a massive tumor growing across the surface. Pulsing organic structures covered entire continents, connected by veins of living tissue that stretched between cities. It was as if the planet itself had been infected by some horrible disease. "Commander," her sensor officer Heiwan whispered, "I'm detecting life signs, but they single quotes wrong somehow." Yune ordered a closer scan, and what they found made her stomach turn. The biosignatures weren't just alien, they were mixtures of Kalani and Vorthok DNA. The swarm hadn't simply killed the population, they had absorbed them, twisted them, turned them into something else entirely. "Look at this," called out her communications specialist, Jun-Sik. He had intercepted fragmentary transmissions from the planet's surface. When the translation came through, Yune had to grip her chair to keep from being sick. The voices were Kalani, but they were pleading to be consumed. The Vorthok had somehow corrupted their minds along with their bodies, turning them into willing participants in their own destruction. Parents were bringing their children to feeding centers. Scientists were eagerly sharing research to help the swarm grow stronger. "Get us everything," Yune ordered, her voice tight with horror. Full-spectrum recordings, bioscans, tactical data. The fleet needs to see this. As they gathered evidence, her crew worked in grim silence. They watched orbital defense platforms that had been converted into breeding centers for new Vorthok creatures. They recorded massive bioships launching from the planet's surface, carrying the infection to new worlds. Worst of all, they detected Kalani ships being piloted by the corrupted survivors, helping to spread the contamination. When they had seen enough, Yune ordered an immediate return to human space. During the journey back, she prepared her report, knowing it would change everything. "Command, this is the Defiant," she transmitted when they reached communication range. "The Kalani are gone, but not the way we thought. The Vorthok don't just kill, they corrupt everything they touch. They turn their victims into willing slaves who help spread the infection. This isn't conquest, it's contamination." The message reached Admiral Hanbo in the converging human fleets within hours. The mission parameters changed immediately. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about extermination. R.I.-Na had been hiding in the wreckage of a research station for 6 weeks, surviving on emergency rations and hope. She was one of perhaps a dozen Kalani left alive in the entire system, watching helplessly as her world transformed into something from a nightmare. Every day, she sent weak distress signals into space, knowing no one would answer, but unable to give up completely. Then space itself seemed to tear open. The first ships emerged from hyperspace like silver stars being born. Then more appeared, and more, until the darkness above her corrupted homeworld blazed with the light of thousands of vessels. Rena stared at her scanner display, certain the radiation from the Vorthok corruption had finally driven her insane. 3,217 ships. Her damaged sensors counted them twice to be sure. Everything from massive battleships that dwarfed anything the Kalani had ever built, down to tiny fighter craft that moved like schools of metal fish. Some looked like official military vessels, sleek and uniform. Others were clearly converted cargo haulers, mining ships, even what appeared to be modified pleasure craft. "This can't be real," she whispered to her empty station. On the planet's surface, the Vorthok swarm felt the arrival through their collective consciousness. The hive mind paused its consumption to analyze these newcomers. They appeared to be another spacefaring species, mammals by their biosignatures, probably here to investigate what had happened to the Kalani. The swarm felt no concern. It had consumed hundreds of species across the galaxy. Some fought with courage, others tried to flee. A few even attempted negotiation. All had been absorbed in the end. These newcomers would simply provide more biomass for the collective. What the Vorthok couldn't understand was why so many different ship types had arrived together. Most species they encountered fought with standardized fleets, uniform tactics, predictable responses. This looked like dozens of different organizations working together, which made no sense to the hive mind's way of thinking. Back on her station, Rena jumped when her communications array suddenly activated. Someone was hailing her directly, using perfect Kalani translation protocols. "Survivor Station, this is Admiral Hanbo of the human fleet. Please respond if you can hear this transmission." Rena's hands shook as she opened the channel. This is Commander Rena. Are you really here? All those ships? We received your message, Commander, came the reply, and Rena could hear the warmth in the alien voice, despite the translation. "We're here to help." "But why?" Rena asked, tears flowing freely now. "We're strangers to you. We have nothing to offer. Our world is already lost." There was a pause before Admiral Hanbo answered. "Because when someone sends a distress call, humans respond. That's what we do. And your world isn't lost yet. We're going to take it back." As if to emphasize the point, the human fleet began moving into formation around the infected planet. Rena watched in amazement as hundreds of different ship designs somehow coordinated into perfect attack patterns. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she had thought was gone forever. Hope. The Vorthok swarm launched its attack with the same strategy that had worked against hundreds of other species. Massive bioships emerged from the planet's surface in perfect formation. Their movements synchronized through the hive mind's collective consciousness. They had overwhelming numbers, superior firepower, and the confidence that came from never losing a battle. They had never fought humans before. Commander Kimso, lead Red Squadron, 24 fighters that had been modified from civilian racing craft. Her pilots were a mix of former military, corporate security, and reformed smugglers, people who had learned to think fast and fight dirty in their previous careers. When the first wave of Vorthok bioships charged toward the human fleet, Kimso did something the hive mind didn't expect. Instead of meeting them head-on, she led her fighters in a seemingly chaotic retreat, weaving between the larger human ships, while the enemy pursued. Red 3, Red 7, break left now, she called out. Red 9, lead them into the crossfire. Zone 2. Any observer, it looked like panic. The fighters scattered in all directions, with bioships chasing them like predators hunting prey. But Kimso had grown up racing through asteroid fields, and her pilots had learned to survive by being unpredictable. The trap closed when the pursuing bioships found themselves caught between multiple human battle groups. Captain Parko's destroyer opened fire from above, while the modified cargo hauler Lucky Strike hit them from below. The Vorthok ships, focused on chasing individual fighters, suddenly faced coordinated fire from directions they hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, Captain Junmi commanded the heavy cruiser Soul's Pride, which had been designed for corporate security operations. When her sensors detected Kalani civilian transports trying to escape the planet's surface, she made a decision that no hive could understand. Instead of pursuing military targets, she deliberately moved her ship between the transports and a group of attacking bioships. The enemy vessels, programmed to destroy any resistance, focused their fire on her cruiser. Hull breach on Deck 7, her damage control officer reported as bioweapons tore through their armor. Let them come, Ganami replied calmly. All power to rear shields. Those civilians are getting out of here. Her ship took massive damage, but the civilian transports reached safety. To the Vorthok hive mind, this made no tactical sense. Why? Would a military vessel sacrifice itself for non-combatants? It went against every logical principle of warfare. That was the problem the swarm faced throughout the battle. Every human ship captain seemed to operate by different rules. The military vessels fought with disciplined precision, but the corporate ships used defensive strategies. The mercenary units employed hit-and-run tactics, and the reformed pirate vessels fought with pure aggression. The hive mind tried to adapt, but every time it developed a counter to one human strategy. 3 more different approaches would emerge from other parts of the fleet. Rena watched the battle from her damaged station, amazed at what she was seeing. They fight like a pack, she observed to herself, but each one thinks differently. That difference was becoming the Vorthak's nightmare. For the first time in their existence, the swarm faced an enemy that couldn't be predicted or understood. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when Engineer J.E. made a discovery that changed everything. She was working frantically in the cargo bay of the converted freighter New Dawn, trying to repair damage from a bioweapon hit, when she noticed something strange about the alien organic material that had splattered across their hull. Captain Wu Jin, you need to see this, she called out, her voice tight with excitement. The biomatter wasn't just random alien tissue, it was part of a communication network. Each piece contained microscopic fibers that connected to other parts of the Vorthok ships, creating a living computer system that linked the entire swarm together. If I can disrupt the signal frequency, ... J.E. muttered, pulling out her engineering scanner. Within minutes, she had jury-rigged a transmitter that sent chaotic signals on the same wavelength the bioships used to communicate. The results were immediate. 3 nearby Vorthok vessels suddenly broke formation, their movements becoming erratic as their connection to the hive mind flickered in and out. All ships, this is New Dawn, JE, broadcast. I'm transmitting disruption frequency on channel 7. Any ship with a modified Gamma ray can jam their network. Across the battlefield, human engineers began adapting the discovery. Captain Hanna, of the mining vessel Deep Drill, had an even better idea. Her ship carried industrial mining charges designed to break apart asteroids, but she had been wondering if they might work against biological targets. Load the seismic charges, she ordered her crew, but modify them with JE's frequency disruptor. When the charges detonated near a cluster of bioships, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The explosions didn't just cause physical damage, they sent massive disruption waves through the organic network, causing entire groups of Vorthok vessels to lose coordination. Their nervous system is external, Hanna realized. We're not just hitting their ships, we're giving their entire fleet a massive headache. From her command ship, Admiral Hanbo watched the tactical display with growing amazement. What had started as a desperate defensive action was turning into something unprecedented. The diverse human fleet, which she had initially worried might be too chaotic to coordinate effectively, was becoming their greatest weapon. The military ships provided disciplined firepower and defensive formations. The corporate vessels used their advanced sensors and defensive systems to protect damaged ships. The mercenary units hit fast and hard before disappearing. The mining ships deployed industrial weapons the Vorthok had never encountered. Even the reformed pirate vessels brought their own brand of unpredictable chaos to the fight. Each group fought differently, thought differently, and contributed something unique to the battle. The hive mind, which was used to facing uniformed military forces, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter so many different tactical approaches happening simultaneously. Ma'am, her aide surgeon reported, all fleet groups are requesting permission to engage freely. Hanbo smiled grimly as she watched another wave of bioships fall to a coordinated attack by 3 completely different types of human vessels. All units, she broadcast across the entire fleet, free engagement, authorized. Show them what happens when you threaten our neighbors. The tide of battle turned completely. For the first time in its existence, the Vorthok swarm was losing. Admiral Hanbo stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display as the last organized Vorthok resistance crumbled around the colony homeworld. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had become something else entirely, something darker and more final. The moment her fleet had seen the recordings from Commander Yune's scout mission, the mission parameters had changed completely. This wasn't an enemy they could negotiate with or drive away. The Vorthok were a contamination that spread from world to world, corrupting everything they touched. There could be no survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. Ma'am, reported her intelligence officer Li Wan. We're detecting bioship fragments attempting to escape the system. Some are trying to reach hyperspace. Not today, Hanbo replied coldly. Jinwo, take your pursuit group and follow them. I don't care if you have to chase them to the edge of the galaxy. Nothing gets away. Commander Jinwo had volunteered for the pursuit mission because he understood what was at stake. His fast attack ships were loaded with the new biodisruption weapons that Engineer JE had developed. As the surviving Vorthok fragments scattered in all directions, his squadrons split up to hunt them down one by one. The chase led through 3 different star systems. Some bioships tried to hide in asteroid fields. Others attempted to reach uninhabited worlds where they could rebuild. Jinwo's teams found them all. They had learned that even a single Vorthok spore could eventually regrow into a new swarm given enough time and organic matter to consume. This is Hunter 7, reported one of his pilots. Found a bioship trying to land on the 3rd moon of Kepler 442. Moving to intercept. Confirmed. Burn it out completely, Jinwo responded. Check for any organic residue and sterilize the landing site. Meanwhile, Captain Yina coordinated the cleanup operations on the worlds the Vorthok had already infected. Her specialized team included former mining engineers, biochemists, and demolition experts who had developed new techniques for biological sterilization. They worked methodically through each contaminated area. The corrupted cities had to be burned down to bedrock. The infected forests were cleared, and the soil itself was treated with modified mining chemicals that broke down organic compounds. Even the oceans required massive filtration operations to remove every trace of Vorthok material. Remember, Yina told her teams, we're not just cleaning up, we're making sure this can never happen again. Every spore, every cell, every molecule of their biology has to be destroyed. For the first time in its existence, the Vorthok hive mind experienced something completely alien to its nature: fear. The collective consciousness that had consumed hundreds of worlds without ever facing real resistance now found itself being systematically hunted to extinction. The humans didn't fight like other species. They weren't content to drive the swarm away or defend their territory. They were eliminating every trace of Vorthok existence with a thoroughness that terrified the hive-mind. As the last bioship died in the cold vacuum of space, the swarm's final thought was a realization that came too late. They had chosen the wrong species to threaten. 3 weeks after the last Vorthok bioship had been destroyed, the human fleet was still working, but instead of hunting enemies, they were rebuilding what had been lost. Construction ships worked around the clock to repair orbital defense platforms. Communications specialists helped restore the colony's data networks. Medical teams treated the few survivors who had managed to avoid corruption. Rena stood on the bridge of her new command ship, a modified human cruiser that Admiral Hanbo had insisted she keep. Through the view screen, she watched human engineers installing the final components of a new defense grid around her homeworld. They had done more than just save the survivors. They had given the colony a chance to rebuild their civilization. "Admiral," she said, as Hanbo joined her on the bridge, "I still don't understand. You've spent weeks here, used massive resources, lost ships and crew members, and now you're giving us technology and ships before you leave. Why risk everything for strangers?" Hanbo looked out at the restored planet, where green was slowly returning to areas that had been cleansed of Vorthok contamination. Because when someone sends an SOS, humans answer. That's what we do. We heard your people's cry for help, and we couldn't ignore it. But you could have just sent a small force, or warned us to evacuate, Rena pressed. Instead, you brought 3,000 ships and fought a war for people you'd never met. The human admiral was quiet for a moment. A long time ago on our homeworld, there was a saying, "No one left behind." It started with our military, but it became something more. We learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. News of the human intervention spread across the galaxy faster than their ships could travel. The story was almost impossible to believe. An entire alien species had mobilized their combined military might to save strangers they had never met, asking for nothing in return. The Tharlan Empire, which had been planning to expand into human territory, quietly changed their expansion routes. The Corvani Trade Federation immediately opened diplomatic channels, eager to establish friendly relations. Dozens of smaller civilizations sent messages of gratitude and offers of alliance, but not everyone was pleased. The Hegemony Council, which had dominated galactic politics for centuries, realized that humanity had just demonstrated military capability that rivaled their own. Emergency sessions were called to discuss the human problem. Other predatory species took a different lesson from the Vorthok's destruction. If humans would fight this hard for strangers, what would they do to protect their own worlds? On the restored Kalani homeworld, survivors began construction of a monument in the capital city. The design was simple, a tall spire reaching toward the stars. With words carved in both Kalani and human languages, the inscription read, "They came when strangers called. They asked for nothing. They left when finished." These are humans. As the human fleet finally departed, heading back to their own space, they left behind more than just rebuilt defenses. They had changed how the galaxy saw them, and how other species thought about the responsibilities that came with power. The age of human isolation was over. The galaxy would never be the same.